Bank want these settlements to become part of Israel. Now, it is not true that Jews are not safe to stay in the occupied territories. So many of my friends who are Jewish who go there as peace activists say that they've never felt as welcomed as when they are in Palestinian homes. So the point is, if settlers want to stay, feel free to stay. Just understand that this is not Israel. You're within a Palestinian state, and you have to, basically agree to live under Palestinian rule.
Thank you. Another question that we've received from students is, do you think this conflict could be resolved with treaties, given the past failures for both Palestinians and Israelis, and what other forms could possibly bring a solution to this conflict?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of this?
Also, opposed to treaties, what other things could bring a solution to this conflict, if not treaties?
Well, I'd like to start. I guess I think it's important to acknowledge that there has been a lot of grassroots peacemaking going on among both Israelis and Palestinians, and I believe it is one of the most powerful groups that I've met with is a group of parents whose children have been killed on both sides and are really trying to network and work with folks about changing attitudes, changing hearts, and changing minds. So like any long-established conflict, it has to happen on what we call three-track diplomacy. It has to happen at the first track where there's actual treaties and international dialogue and negotiation taking place. It has to take place second track where there's organizations that support the peacemaking process, and the third track, the informal peacemaking, and that's where really we all come in. And I think it's very important that we examine the amount of funding that we as evangelicals have sent to one side, to Israel, and how that has perpetuated the problem from being resolved.
I'll jump in. I hope that it can be settled through treaties and negotiations. I think that's the ideal for everybody here, is that we can have a peaceful resolution to this conflict. And Israel has, in the past, tried to negotiate an end to this. They found a way to negotiate peace with Jordan, found a way to negotiate peace with Egypt. But the question now is, who do you make peace with in the Palestinian Authority? With Hamas as central power in the government, Hamas is a terrorist organization branded by the State Department, responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Israelis and even some Americans. Can you make peace with that organization, with an organization that doesn't believe you even have the right to exist? So there has to be an acceptance on the part of Palestinians that Israel, wherever the final borders may be, is going to exist as a Jewish state. And when the government, the parties in that government accept the fact, Israel has shown its willingness to withdraw from territories. Now, Resolution 242, which you brought up, never calls on Israel to withdraw from all of the territories. If you read the wording carefully, you'll see that. But again, we can find the resolution has to come from acceptance of Israel as a legitimate state, as a Jewish state in the region.
To touch on 242 real briefly, the resolution does say Israel is obligated to withdraw from territories occupied in 1967. Now, the absence of the word the suggestion is it was deliberate, but this is irrelevant because basically at the beginning of the resolution, in the preface of it, it is cited that the principle on which the resolution is based is the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by force. So that explains to you what that basic thing is. And if even we were to accept that Resolution 242 is actually ambiguous, there's a later resolution that came out, which is Resolution 446, and this very explicitly says the occupied territories of 1967, and it says the West Bank, Gaza Strip, including East Jerusalem. It actually explicitly says East Jerusalem as well. So it is quite clear that East Jerusalem is occupied, and it's quite clear that the barrier that Israel is currently building does go around Jerusalem, basically, having East Jerusalem on the Israeli side of the border. So there's no question that the root of the barrier that is currently being built is in complete violation of international law on the basis that it takes Palestinian territory away. On the issue of recognizing Israel's right to exist, I mean, just the term the right to exist is quite interesting. If you ask a Native American, does the United States have a right to exist? Or if you ask a Mexican, does the United States have a right to California? I mean, the answer philosophically, is probably not. I mean, just the way that these things came about is not exactly justified. But people accept that things exist. People accept the status quo. I don't think anybody in Mexico right now really suggests that Mexico ought to get back California, regardless of how the United States took it. And similarly, even though I mean, the requirement that Hamas must accept Israel's right to exist is to basically say that the ethnic cleansing of over 700,000 Palestinians from what became Israel is somehow justified. So I think the fact that Hamas is willing to accept Israel's existence and not the right to exist, and they have shown that by agreeing to sign the prisoners' proposal during the negotiations to basically allow Fatah to carry on the negotiations with Israel. I mean, that just gives you a sign that they are flexible on this issue. Now, on how to achieve peace, treaties, I actually think, I mean, we can leave the negotiations for Israelis and Palestinians to figure these things out, but I think there's a way that we in the United States can actually help end the conflict, is because the United States, Israel is the single largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid, receiving roughly $3 billion, virtually all of it in military aid at this point. And they would not be able to continue with their violations of international law that perpetuate the conflict had it not been for U.S. support. So I think the role that we can play is basically put pressure on our government to be more even-handed in their approach to the conflict.
All right. Thank you for your comments. And unfortunately,
make one last comment.
Okay.
2 minutes. Sure. One thing that I look at, we were arguing about all these little details, and of course I'm going to disagree, and so on and so forth. So as an audience, you're very confused. One thing that I see with the conflict, if you look throughout the Middle East and just take some time and looking at video, the hatred, the racist hatred against Jews throughout the Middle East is off the charts. And what you have is a situation where in Jordan, who is a moderate Arab state, says that Jews can never be a citizen in their constitution. And so you have a situation where they don't want Jews in the Middle East, and using the words like occupation, Osama bin Laden said Spain is occupied territory. And so one thing that I encourage is that once you lessen that reality, once you lessen the horrific, true anti-Semitism, not just I don't like Israel and I criticize the government, but true anti-Semitism throughout the Middle East, I believe then we will see a new Middle East. Not just for Israel and Palestine, but the entire Middle East.
All right. Well, thanks again, panelists, for all your perspectives. We really appreciate you coming out. Just a quick comment. Clearly, this conversation has only begun. We've just gotten into some of the bits and details. We're hoping that this will be a catalyst for a future discussion on campus or elsewhere. Our panelists will be available for the next 15 minutes or so. If you'd like to come down and meet them and ask them any questions yourself, you're welcome to do that. Go thoughtfully and peacefully.